idea of like omitting a variable from the equation. It's about politics most of the time, right? It's not necessarily about Islam. Islam might be an organizing principle that these people might use, but that's not why you act. I mean, look, Muslims are not attacking non-Muslims every day all over the place for hundreds of years. It's just not the case. There are very specific political sort of situations that are happening that have to do with that. And I mean, to counter it, it's challenging because, again, a lot of the framing comes from the way that the press is covering these issues. But I mean, I think that grassroots efforts and working with groups to sort of propagate the idea that there is no such thing as a monolithic Islamic faith. It's very important. It's important to highlight the things that Muslims are doing to help fight terrorism. It's important to highlight the things that Muslims are doing in their communities. You know, I mean, I think that this is a very important thing to show the diversity of Muslims. I mean, you know, the general conception is, you know, a Muslim is some, you know, bearded dude with from the Middle East or something like that. That's not most Muslims in the world, period, right? So Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. I mean, it's a very diverse sort of thing. So I mean, I think part of it is to continually try to combat sort of these issues and to try to highlight the fact that, you know, Muslims are doing a lot of fascinating things and they're very different and they're all over the place. And no other group sort of does that. You know, when Terry Jones was burning or thinking of burning the Quran, you didn't see people saying, oh, it's Christianity. That's emblematic of all of Christianity. No, because that's insane. You know, we might have all said he had a funny mustache, but that's about it, you know? So I think we have to be particularly active across communities on that issue because that's the fundamental problem of what's happening and how the debate has been framed, is that we exclude probably the most important variable in the entire equation, which is politics. And I think that we just need to keep combating that.
First of all, on the monolithic thing, I always have to add, you know, the Muslims in the room will know this. We can't even celebrate our holidays on the same day. So anybody that says that Muslims are all like one unified community that can always speak with one voice, please. And I actually picked that fight about the definition with Faiz just to show that. We don't agree on everything, but we can have civil disagreements. That's core. What is CARE doing strategically? We don't call them call trees, we call them action alerts. Our action alerts are used very frequently. I'm very pleased to say to you that our community is wonderful in their support of our action alerts. A couple of examples, there was a major bank we had an issue with a few years back. Another organization had worked on it for 4 months with no response. We sent out an action alert. I had the CEO on the phone with me 2 hours later. Same thing, Boeing Bell Helicopter. We had an issue with them. We sent out the action alert. They were on the phone with us within a couple of hours. So our community gets how to do that, and they do it very well. But other things that we do, anybody who knows CARE knows we are in the media constantly, and this goes to how do you change things. I was taught early on to create the news, don't react to the news. So I'm always looking to find ways to bring up stories rather than react to the stories. Now, unfortunately, these days things move too fast. I mean, Park 51 hit us out of the blue completely, and we spent a month working on it. The last thing I would say that we do is we're moving toward hiring more lawyers so that we can file more lawsuits. The Oklahoma thing that I talked about is a great example of that. What I didn't mention is we've already had a federal judge rule in our favor on that. She put a stay on that law, so right now that law does not have any effect in Oklahoma. So, you know, those are the things that we can show our community. These are the encouraging things. I think it also sends a great message to extremists that your messaging is totally wrong. Muslims can operate in the United States and can succeed within the law. We just have to follow it and keep pushing.
All right. I'm going to tackle your question about the media and tie it into what you said. One of the top 5 complaints in all Muslim American communities is what? Media. It's the big boogeyman. Afghan American communities, Middle Eastern American communities, Pakistani American communities, African American communities. So I say the following. Have you told your son or daughter to become a journalist? Have you told your son or daughter to become a screenwriter, a director? Have you told your son or daughter to become a TV producer? No, they will become doctors. Then I say you have lost all license to complain. Because if all you're going to do is whine and complain and react and become a cultural consumer and not a cultural creator, then you cannot be surprised why 30 years later people don't know us. and people don't know our story. So there is a problem that exists within Muslim American communities, and we have failed. And we are acknowledging this failure. The fact that we didn't step up. But we are stepping up now, so what do? You have to bum rush the show. So now what we do is you have to become Muslim American producers, you gotta be writers, you have to be content creators, because no one's gonna give it to us. No one gave it to the African Americans, no one gave it to the Jewish Americans, no one gave it to the gays and lesbians. If I told you 10 years ago that the #1, that America would wake up to a lesbian, Ellen DeGeneres, you would have laughed in my face. Right or wrong? Will and Grace would be a popular show 15 years ago. Would you have agreed with me? No. L Word, Showtime, right? Cosby Show, going back to the first question. Obama, 5 years ago, I already just said, get out of my face. That's not gonna happen while I'm alive. So if you don't step up, #1, and you're not willing to invest either in your community's talents, if you're not willing to invest your money in foundations and scholarships for the talented people in your community, if you're not willing to encourage people to invest in these institutions, then you've lost all license to complain, okay? The opportunities are presented to us. Muslim Americans are the most racially diverse community in the world, in America. The most, Muslim women are the most educated. Muslim American women are the most educated amongst the religious women. And Muslim American communities are amongst the wealthiest. So we really are privileged people, whether we like to admit that or not, most of us, many of us. So we have no excuse. Putting that right to your point, people say Islam was hijacked. Muslims woke up after 9/11, they're like, what happened? What happened? Why does everyone think of us like this? Oh my God, I'm a nice guy, I'm a dentist. I live in the suburb, right? Goes back to the question is, religion, nationality are always very popular and convenient vehicles that are always used and abused by people to advance their political ideologies. Has always been the case, will always be the case. The reason why it doesn't happen to Christians and Jews because it happens to Christians and Jews, the religious right in this country, all right? The religious right in Israel, the religious right in India amongst Hindus. But the reason why Christians wholesale don't get a backlash, or Jews wholesale don't get a backlash when their religion gets hijacked by a fringe element is because there are enough voices, enough stories, enough narratives reflecting the complexity and diversity of that community that people say, oh, we realize that that's just one crazy Jewish person, that's just one crazy Christian person, that's not all of Christianity, that's not all of Judaism. You need to have education, teachers who teach their kids books. You have to have community activists and leaders who join forces, reach out across the aisle and say, hey, let me go to your synagogue, you come to my mosque. You need to have families who teach you that all bigotry is wrong, because it all begins in the family. You need responsible media personalities like Jon Stewart, Keith Olbermann, who stepped up during Park 51 and said, this is ridiculous bigotry. They stepped up, they didn't have to. There were non-Muslim allies. I have non-Muslim allies, Guardian, Huffington Post, Salon. I reach out to them, they reach out to me. Great relationships. You have to have responsible political leaders who are willing to put forth responsible, ethical, wise domestic and foreign policy initiatives. And then you need cultural tools, perhaps like the Muslim Cosby Show, so that God forbid if some tragedy happens, America won't wake up and say a religion was hijacked. They'll just say that was one crazy person.
You may have noticed we were having some microphone difficulties, so we're going to try to use this one. I'd ask you guys to come up here and ask your question this way. I know it's difficult. I apologize for that, but that's what we got. Next one.
No problem, straight. I wanted to thank Cap for putting the panel together. This has been quite educational. I just had two quick questions. One, I wanted to ask, why is it after nearly 10 years after 9/11, we're seeing Islamophobia on the rise, and probably in a way that it's been far more pernicious now than it was 10 years ago? And the second question that I wanted to ask is if you could highlight the role of organizations like the Clarion Fund and others that have been supporting and funding in various different ways the rising Islamophobia that we've been seeing over the past 12 months.
Hi. I wanted to ask about, well, I should preface this with I'm an atheist. And I'm usually arguing and, bickering with my religious friends, usually in a Christian sense, about certain things I don't like, about their religion, about Christianity in general. And homophobia comes up a lot. I'm gay. And when I do that, I found that within the last, like, I don't know, 5, 6 years, when I make the same arguments as with Islam in view, I've been called an Islamophobe. And it's like, when I'm disgusted with homophobia that I see within Islamic communities, not all Muslims, usually the more educated Muslims, not so much at all. They're nicer than the Christians I know. But in general, and definitely within the Islamic text, within the Quran and Hadiths, when I say I think that's disgusting and I don't like that, I've been called an Islamophobe. How do you know, when somebody just said, you know, fighting bigotry. When you ask Muslim Americans or Muslims across the world to fight bigotry, what if they don't consider it bigotry at all? What if they consider it an article of faith?
Can I jump in on that? Because there's a whole bunch of strands I'm going to miss. So I'm going to try to tie together your question and Malachi's, and then come back to Faisal's, and then yours, looping in yours. And so if I get lost on the way,
that is ambitious.
Help me out. I'll try to be quick. All right. So, right. Imperialism, ultimately, marginalization is the issue here. And I appreciate that you're sort of an equal opportunity denigrator of organized faiths. I feel the same way, quite frankly. I don't go to mosques. I don't go to organized religion. To me, I just don't dig it, period. And so I think that there is plenty of abuse, quite frankly, to go around. Islamophobia, I don't think of as concern about marginalization. That's different. And there are a lot of, if you go to the texts that inform either Christian or Jewish or Muslim faiths, all of them are actually quite social justice minded. Our respective reflections of those doctrines in reality are vastly imperfect, right? No religious community even comes close to doing justice to the principles which animate us all. And if you go to the principles, they're all the same anyway, so why we have so many different sorts, right? It's a long line. And I think that whether it's religious sort of denigration of particular communities or whether it's political ones, going back to Malachi's point and this idea that, 60 years ago, 2 generations ago, we were all essentially subjects of the British Crown, right? We are incredibly privileged just to live in this civilization. The walls of Babylon may seem like they're crumbling around us, but we've never had access to this kind of information, this kind of cultural capital being in the midst of a global melting pot. These are world historically unique opportunities, and we do happen to be from a relatively well-resourced community in the whole. And I think that it is, whatever the locus of marginalization, we are called on as human beings to address it. And this gets back to your point. I don't think we have a hope of frontally resisting the narrative. Wajahat was just talking about the resiliency of other communities where fringe elements might hijack it. The reason they're resilient is because there are enough narratives. There is a civil society. Our only hope is to address it indirectly by diversifying the narratives that are used to represent us. And the only way to do that is for us to aggressively represent ourselves in different narratives. Right? I've spent untold hours literally standing in the street kicking spoken word rhymes at people coming off metro trains, with guerrilla poetry crews around the country. It's like you make your own media, right? Be visible. Anytime you find yourself yelling at the television, turn it off and go build something, right? We have to be social entrepreneurs. It is critical that for the macrocosm, for us as a community to have any hope, we in the individual must be content creators, to go back to Wajahat's term, right? I think everybody on this panel, we all blog, most of us organize, and most of us are creative writers. You have, and that ultimately, I think if there was a common element that brought us together at the beginning, it was that. How do we represent people who are creating content from within Muslim communities? And that's an opportunity that all of us have, right? Going back to strategies, I think that was over here. And this also ties into Faisal's question about why Islamophobia is worse now 10 years later. There is a lot of money now that was not available 10 years ago to nationalists who are willing to use Islamophobia as a trope. Did anybody read the Dana Priest and William Arkin series in the Washington Post, Top Secret America? 3 stories last summer, another one in December. If you haven't read them, I implore you, do it. They are long, they're intense, and they are terrifying, because what they basically document is the rise of a secret government in the intelligence agencies. Covert budgets that are invisible not just to us or the press, but also Congress, entire, agencies that are basically secret. The CIA has been constitutionally insulated from transparency for a generation, too, in fact. the extent to which there is an unaccountable, essentially secret layers of government. Fusion centers are a good example. These are regional entities bringing together state and local law enforcement, federal law enforcement, the private sector, military intelligence. There are over 70